again, fight fans. I am Jason Burgos for Sherdog.com, and this is an all-new edition of Back Talk. Don't mind the hair; it's a bit curly. We are in the middle of a pandemic. Barbers are closed, and I don't do well with combs or brushes, so I've got to do the hand hair thing. So please don't mind it. We've got a whole bunch of questions in another busy week. Somehow, despite there's no UFC, no Bellator, no Combate, no One Championship, no PFL, nothing going on, MMA still seems to be a very busy business. So we got a whole bunch of questions coming to you from the Sherdog Forums, and let's get this week's first question comes from DP Funny, and they ask, the word is that Tony Ferguson is still cutting weight for UFC 249 on April 18th. I mean, it looks like maybe was cutting, probably going to be cutting weight again for May 9th, but I don't understand this. What do you think is the reason? It's simply that Tony Ferguson is Tony Ferguson, and Tony Ferguson in general means kind of weird, kind of crazy, kind of unique, kind of different, all kinds of slightly crazy, and just a completely unusual, once-in-a-lifetime professional athlete. He's just different. Simply put, the guy's different. And he's the kind of guy that seems to just... he needs a focus. He needs something to aim towards. And maybe that's part of his reinvention and his change. You know, he's had the recent issues with domestic violence and stuff like that. You know, not as bad as some others, but he's had something going on in his personal life. So maybe that's part of a renewed focus to keep him on the straight and narrow. He needs something to aim towards. He needs something to look at. And honestly, that's a problem, an issue for everybody in the world, everybody in the country, and even UFC fighters and MMA fighters in general. I've talked to a whole bunch of them. If you haven't seen, look up the Coronavirus Chronicles on Sherdog and on the Sherdog YouTube channel. And, you know, it's fighters that are hoping to have fights, especially UFC ones. They like being able to focus on something, to not focus on all the other difficult, even depressing stuff going on all around us. So maybe he just, with no fight, he's just the kind of guy that he liked not having to focus on the outside noise of the difficulty we've all been dealing with, and he wants to just focus on the weight cut. And that's an all-consuming kind of thing for a professional fighter in that last week or so of a fight week. So the pride, the focus, the desire, the competitiveness in him to still compete. If he's not going to compete against another fighter, Justin Gaethje or Khabib Nurmagomedov, to compete against himself and his body and his mind to make weight, even though he doesn't have to. It's weird, it's odd, it's kind of unnecessary, especially for what it does to the body and what weight cuts do to the organs and the immune system in a tough time with a contagious virus. But you kind of have to respect him. You know, he's the consummate professional, as odd as he can be and different, but make weight when he doesn't have to, so I dig it. Our next question comes from Gray Area. They ask, what do you think is the most evolved division in terms of the top 10 fighters from 10 years ago? And for me, it simply comes down to the UFC bantamweights, man. And I'll just focus on the UFC instead of the whole, you know, industry. They do have the top dogs in most of the sports and stuff like that, but the UFC bantamweight division is unbelievable. There was a time where the UFC bantamweight division, or if you want to say WEC, but it was controlled by the UFC, the bantamweight division at its highest level was Miguel Torres, and not much else. There wasn't a lot else going on aside from Miguel Torres for so long. And then you had a time where you had Dominick Cruz, and then Dominick Cruz got your favorite, and Dominick Cruz had some interesting tests, and Demetrius Johnson and certain other guys, and did some interesting things, but it wasn't like any of the other divisions. You know, featherweight also took some time to develop, but it came along with Jose Aldo and became amazing. And then all the other divisions, we all know how great they are. Bantamweight was the one that really still, it had like the one guy and kind of not too much issue. We had that with Renan Barão for a while too. He was the one guy and not too much competition. And then TJ Dillashaw really was the dawning of a new age in terms of helping that division, and it really seemed to bloom from TJ Dillashaw on. And he was even a great dominant champion, even if you question if he was all the way natural or not. But just look at this list we have right now in the UFC bantamweight division. Cejudo, Moraes, Sterling, Jan, Sanhagen, Asuncao, Aldo, Munoz, Garbrandt, Stamen and Marlon Vera. Marlon Vera is at the end of the 15 for the UFC rankings right now, and he's filthy. He's nasty. He's got like 4 fights, finishes in a row. He's unbelievable, and that's with the back end guy. And then add on Frankie Edgar maybe still coming into the division. We'll see. And then TJ Dillashaw is coming back soon. You can question PEDs all you want, but he's still going to come back and still be nasty and still be a filthy fighter. So, man, bantamweight is unbelievable right now. This is the most exciting division in the UFC for me right now. And if we're talking purely about evolving in the last 10 years, I mean, hell, the evolution of bantamweight in the last 2 years has been unbelievable. But for me, overall, that's the division that's evolved the most, because not only does it have top to bottom a great bunch of talents now, it's developing some of the very best fighters on the planet. The Dominick Cruzes, the TJ Dillashaws, the Henry Cejudos. These are some of the pound for pound guys. So for me, evolution is all about bantamweight. But they ask, does UFC 250 on May 9 happen? Simple question, but very hard to answer at this point. It seems likely like it should. Not sure how much Mr. Brony you're following, the political situation right now and just different social situations in the U.S. or any of you out there watching. But last night, the Coronavirus Task Force kind of announced the plans for phasing through, going from the state we're in now to maybe phasing into a place where we can start slowly reopen the economy, reopen gatherings, all the stuff, phasing through next phase to the on. So, I mean, mattering of where it's happening, if it's going to be Las Vegas, there's been talk of Las Vegas May 1st, they might really start to head in that direction, and maybe they go into phase 1 and hopefully maybe they're in phase 2 and it's a different thing. But it's hard to say. Right now, my gut says yeah, but you know what? 2 weeks ago, we thought UFC 249 was going to happen on April 18th, and now April 18th is tomorrow for when this is recorded, and that's not happening. Things are changing so quickly, and the fact that the UFC is kind of thumbing their nose at what authorities, local governments, state governments, even federal governments kind of want to do right now is already a problem, and it puts itself against the power and the influence of what's going on right now in the best interests of probably the entire country, the entire world. But we'll see. I mean, it seems likely. Maybe they don't do it in Vegas. Maybe they do it in that same press conference with the task force. They talked about certain states are already probably ready to go into phase 1, and then 2 weeks later maybe phase 2, and on, and it'll be easier for them. So maybe they don't do it. Maybe all of a sudden this event on May 9th happens in South Dakota or Wyoming or something where the virus hasn't been too much of an issue. So right now, sure, I think it should happen. Will it? We'll see by May 8th what's going to happen. The next question comes from BJ Penn Goat. They ask, how do we know Dominick Cruz has anything left in the tank? It's a good question, and you'd never really know. The man has had so many hiatuses. I talked about it in the recent Back Talk edition. He's had so many long hiatuses, so few fights in like the last decade, and somehow this guy comes off the proverbial schneid, whoops ass, fights top contenders, fights top fighters, wins championships, and it's just an all-time unbelievably amazing fighter. You gotta wonder about his age. Sooner or later, ring rust inactivity has to have an effect. But for a guy like him, if he's said this in interviews, and I talked about it on that aforementioned Back Talk, he will only do it if he's where he wants to be health-wise. That means probably 100%, and he's not going to do it any other way. So if he's 100% healthy, this man always keeps himself in shape, and he has a singular style that has always been just a massive puzzle for anyone to deal with. He's always going to have a chance, even at his age. Closing in, and he continues to get closer to 40, but he's not even that close to 40. I'm closer to 40 than he's closer to 40. But he's that kind of an athlete and that kind of a talent in terms of his uniqueness of his style. He's still going to have something left in the tank and still be a danger. Is it enough to be a champion again? I'm not sure. Is it enough to be Henry Cejudo? I don't know. But as much as we could say Henry Cejudo has the wrestling and the talent, is one of the best athletes in any combat sports of the last generation, decade, all that stuff, Has Henry Cejudo fought anything like Dominick Cruz? No. I mean, he fought TJ, but that didn't even last that long, and then TJ was killing himself to get down to flyweight, and that's probably the closest. And even TJ Dillashaw is not like Dominick Cruz, not with those fancy dancing feats. So it'd be an interesting fight, whoever he fought. I think he still would have something in gas tank because he would only come into it as the best version he could be of himself at this moment right now. And even at a later age then, and not in his prime anymore, if he's coming in healthy, while other guys will come into fights not healthy with ACLs and all these kinds of injuries, yeah, maybe Cejudo comes into that fight not healthy, and that balances out right there, balances everything out right there. So yeah, I still think that guy, he's the one guy that would still have something in the gas tank after all these years. This question comes from the legendary Scarface. They ask, do you anticipate Kamaru Usman to stand and trade with Jorge Masvidal the entire time? No. No, that's not going to happen. If it happens, maybe I need to just quit my Sherdog job, and I don't know what the hell's going on if that happens. I'd be absolutely stunned. That doesn't mean he's not going to stand with them. Every fight has to start standing, but I can't imagine the entire time. No way. Unless the entire time is him getting knocked out or knocking out Jorge Masvidal within a few minutes, and then that's the entire time. Sure, in that case, but we're talking about a prolonged fight with strategy and plays out over multiple rounds. No way. And I'm going to give you some stats why to back it up. I'm just going to give you some information. Kamaru Usman, his strikes by position statistics from UFC.com, and this is an accumulation of all his UFC-specific stats. They don't do all careers stats. Is 41% standing, 37% on the ground, and 22% in the clinch. So 59% of Usman's strikes in a fight are in grappling exchange, be it a clinch or on the ground. So that's where he wants to fight. That's where he always wants to fight. On average, he averages 3.96 takedowns per 15 minutes, which in terms of takedown attempts and landed takedowns, he's got a 33% accuracy of landed takedowns. And in general, of his 16 wins, half of them are by decision. So this is a guy who's more than willing to grapple, grind it out, get a decision. I mean, and he gets his finishes. He's got like a good amount of KOs and TKOs, and he's gotten better with his striking, no doubt. Working with Henry Hoof down in Hard Knocks will definitely get your striking to a whole nother level. But in the end, he's a smart fighter. He's not going to put himself in a dangerous position, and he's going to fight strategically. And adding to that idea of fighting strategically, in general, to compare, Jorge Masvidal averages 1.16 takedowns per 15 minutes, but his striking percentage, how it spreads out, 70% of his strikes landed, of significant strikes, is on the feet. Now, granted, he has a 78% takedown defense. Now, he's no easy guy to take down, but if his strengths are striking, and that's where he always wants the fight to be, and he's showing at welterweight, dude's a filthy striker in terms of finishing guys. He was always a filthy striker, but something about lightweight, maybe he was just sapping his body too much, and he didn't have the pop he's clearly developed now at welterweight. So on a strategic level, why offer Jorge Masvidal the best chance to win by striking with him? Usman has a great gas tank. He has very good wrestling. Don't be fooled by what happened with him and Colby. That was a choice by those two men in that cage, and they said, you know, we're going to stand the bang and we're going to go at it. They didn't even the fact that Colby chose not to even really grapple too much, and Usman didn't as much, that to me, that was an outlier. That fight, the way it played out, was to me a complete outlier, and it's surprising to me. In this case, with someone as nasty as a striker as Jorge Masvidal, no way in the holy bleep does this guy Usman choose to stand up with him for the entire fight. The next question comes from not a real fan. That's nice. The brother of the UFC owner says a return of crowds in sports events won't happen until late 2021. Even assuming the UFC can put on events, are you ready for another 18 months of empty arena fights? Sadly, yeah. I think most people might agree that this whole thing has beaten us all down to a level where we're more than ready to accept a substandard level of entertainment than we were having 2 months ago. That's kind of the way of things, and I think the phrase "new normal" is going around all over the place in the country right now, and it's in just the unfortunate state of where we are at as a nation, as a world, dealing with this coronavirus pandemic. And it's not a shocking thing you know, the mayor of Los Angeles openly said there's a chance that they don't even do major gatherings or public events or sporting events till next year. That's LA. So I mean, who knows? That probably affects filming and movies, all TV show, all kinds of things. But am I ready? Sure. I mean, I'm ready for MMA to get going. And if it means empty arena events for Combate and Bellator and One Championship and the UFC, and I talked to the CEOs of Combate and LFA, they talked about maybe doing studio shows where it's just a fight in a studio, kind of almost like WCW Worldwide kind of style back in the day with just no audience. And we can probably get used to it. I mean, I think MMA, like wrestling, even though wrestling isn't what it once was right now with no fans, it lends itself to that possibility. Just have a small group, the fighters' corners, and that's enough of the noise to keep it going. It's going to be harder to watch things like baseball, football, basketball, those things if they return with no crowds. So yeah, I'm ready for 18 months. Hopefully it doesn't have to be that long. Hopefully there's a virus antidote created and a vaccine created in that time so we don't have to get there. But I'm just happy. I'd just be happy to have my MMA back and continuing to, and instead of talking about what I've talked about in the Coronavirus Chronicles, talk about fights again. I miss it, and I'll be used to it.